on TV as a regular series again. And this is where there's a kind of circularity to the story. Those scripts lay dormant because, as you know, we didn't come back as a TV series. We came back as a cartoon series, the animated version. And then 10 years later, we made our first feature film, and that turned into a series of feature films. But those scripts were still there. And next month, I'm going to be working on one of those scripts that is going to be, it's an hour show. It's not going to be telecast. It's not going to be playing at your local movie theaters. It's going to play on your local computers and laptops. It's going to be webcast. And it is a fascinating script. The science fiction ideas are absolutely mind-bogglingly imaginative. And the personal drama is heartbreaking. And I'm just champing at the bits to work on it. And it'll be webcast early next year. The episode is called The World, Enough, and Time, written by Michael Reed. And it's going to be a wonderful show. And the other...
This, of course, is for Star Trek New Voyages.
New Voyages,
yes.
Right. But by this time now, Star Trek fans, like you, are also in positions of power. They're producers, directors, and writers. And one of them happens to be the man who directed Mission Impossible 3, which was a big box office success. And so he's got some muscle. And he went to Paramount, despite the fact that Paramount announced that, you know, we're done with Star Trek. Star Trek Enterprise was a cellar dweller in the ratings. Star Trek, the 10th Star Trek movie was a flop, so we're, you know, that's the end of Star Trek. Well, J.J. Abrams, the director of Mission Impossible 3, went into Paramount and pitched Star Trek. He said, I want to do Star Trek. And because he is such an influential director, they said, okay. So now he's preparing.
No, what? You're saying Abrams went to Paramount?
Yes. And he said, I want to do Star Trek. And when your movie's done worldwide, grossed over $600 million, they say, yes, sir. And so now he's preparing a script together with the writers. And some of the buzz that we've heard is that Matt Damon may be cast as Captain Kirk. Isn't that intriguing? A young Captain Kirk, a slim Captain Kirk, and a hairy Captain Kirk.
All right, okay, here's the thing. There have been, over the course of the last 30, 40 years, there have been half a dozen different Batmans, there have been a dozen or more different James Bonds, there have been God knows how many Lone Rangers and Zorros and you know, 500 Draculas. I think that one of Gene Roddenberry's most brilliant decisions was 10 years after the end of the original series, rather than recast the crew of the Enterprise, he brought back all of the original actors, including yourself, and although everything else had changed, the ship was redesigned, the bridge was completely unrecognizable, the uniforms were completely different, he brought back the original cast, who had clearly aged in the 10 years. That was the bridge from the series to the movies that made the movie work. Now, of course, we know the story wasn't all that great, but we believe that these were the characters. I've always thought that is what made the film series successful as a whole, some better than others. Now we're talking about recasting the original cast with new actors. How do you feel about that?
Well, you know, 10
do you really
years
want to
after,
see a younger man play your character?
Well, let me put it this way. 10 years after Star Trek was canceled, you know, we were still dynamic and vigorous, slim, and we looked more or less like what we did 10 years ago.
Especially you.
Now, well, I still look like that. Also, I'm the youngest of our group.
Yes.
But now visualize some of my colleagues as they are today, in a dynamic, vigorous, active capacity. That's going to take a lot of imagination. I do think, well, you know, here's the example. You talked about a dozen James Bonds. And yeah, some Bonds were more Bond-like than others, but Sean Connery was the quintessential James Bond.
Sure.
And yet the public accepted other variations of the character. And we have another new one coming up, Daniel Craig.
The blonde guy. Yeah.
Blonde guy, you know. But what's important, I think, is the story. As long as the story captures the essence of those characters, I think it'll work. So it's going to be very interesting to see, you know, who the writers are, what the story is, how gripping and commanding the actors that play the characters can be. I mean, did you not like the other James Bond movies? Some you may have liked more than the others, but you know they've been very successful. Well, Pierce Brosnan, I thought, was good, reasonable.
Yeah, he did well. But these other franchises are not Star Trek.
No.
Now,
as James Bond is not Star Trek.
You made it clear in your autobiography that when The Next Generation premiered, almost 20 years ago now, there was some sort of resistance, perhaps even some resentment to that, and these were new actors playing new characters in a couple of generations down the road. If you felt that way about that cast then, certainly a new cast playing previously established characters has got to hit you right in the heart.
Well, you got to remember, we were then young and proud and full of hubris. And we just assumed that any Star Trek has got to be us, you know. And later, you know, after the success of The Next Generation and some of the other variations on our Star Trek, we came to realize the essence of Star Trek is the vision and the spirit and the optimism about our human destiny. And so I do think that it can work with a little, you know, as long as they get the core value of Star Trek. And J.J. Abrams has demonstrated that he's a great storyteller, he's a wonderful filmmaker, and can tell a story cinematically in a commanding, gripping, absolutely engrossing way. So the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Let's wait to eat that pudding.
Okay. Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was always an optimistic one, very idealistic in a lot of respects.
And idealism is what keeps, you know, us going forward. Negativism, pessimism never moves us forward. Idealism is essential. We have a lot of intelligent people here.
Is the idealistic, optimistic vision of the future still relevant in a post 9/11 world, do you think?
I think, you know, the Muslim extremists, the terrorists, are the most negative, pessimistic people in the world. And yes, if anything, idealism and our optimism about the future is more important because of the rampant negativism and pessimism of terrorism. You know, we live today now in a whole different world. People who are so pessimistic about life, who are so negative about life, that they will kill themselves to kill others. That's madness. I mean, it's going against the basic natural survival instinct. I mean, when you when people lived in that kind of sickness, you know, that will never make headway. Ultimately, they're going to kill themselves. And that's why I think that underscores the importance of our being optimistic about our future. You know, terrorism will never win. Terrorism is something that is self-destructive, self-destroying. I mean, that's the core of it. You know, the people that flew those planes into the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, were willing to destroy themselves, to destroy the world that they hated.
But certainly that was nothing new. You have World War II, Pearl Harbor, you mentioned earlier, were kamikaze pilots.